and Back Classic NBA podcast. I am Jason, and with me as usual is Rich. Hello, Rich.
What's going on, Jason?
It's feeling good. We now have all of our archives back. All 270 episodes are available at overandbacknba.com. Feels good I feel like I'm fully restored again. I'm whole now.
Yeah, so. No, it was not easy. Yeah, we had we mentioned it I forget when it actually went down, somewhere earlier in the very, very long year that was 2020, where. And not to kind of peel the curtain back a little bit, but essentially our old podcast provider downgraded us we're not really sure why, and as a result, as we're like, hey, why are you downgrading us? We shouldn't be downgraded. We should be upgraded. We don't need it. Didn't get any answers to anybody, and then all of a sudden one day we go and all of our archives got deleted, and it was just like, oh God. So thankfully, and the other issue too is the computer that I recorded I edited most of the shows on. The hard drive is dead on it. It fell, it dropped, and I've tried to get people to recover it. Nobody can quite work on it. So it was oh my God, these are lost forever. How the hell are we going to get to these? Where are we going to find these? And we were able to kind of put them all together from different sources: my computer, your computer, online downloads, Google Drives, a bunch of random places. I think one or two we maybe had to ask somebody for, but eventually we got there and we got it. Now all 270 episodes of Over and Back are back up there and accessible on all podcast apps, as well as at overandbacknba.com and YouTube as well. They're all up on YouTube. So very happy that we were able to do that. And now, again, I do feel especially with our show, because there's so many people hey, I want to listen to this episode. And I'm I know that there's no real way to do it well. I know, because that's what our show is that you can go back and listen to an episode from 5 years ago. And yeah, we might say something stupid about some player that ended up actually not being good, or some hey, this guy's on the trajectory of being a star, and then he ends up not doing it, or we badmouth somebody who's actually great, or you know what I mean?
Hey, Greg Monroe's Greg Monroe's going to be a Hall of Famer someday.
Yeah, right. If Greg Monroe continues on this pace, this 2010 pace that he's on right now, I mean, sky is absolutely the limit for this guy. And this Steph Curry guy, I don't know. I don't know if a guard like that is going to be able to, win in the NBA. Who knows? Well, that's how long this stupid show's been around. Is the NBA's changed dramatically for as long as it has, as long as we've been around. But when we first started, I'm sure that we had very pro Greg Monroe and very I don't know about Steph. It might be tough.
Yeah, right. I mean, definitely no team can shoot as many threes, many threes and actually succeed. It's impossible.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Come on. It's too high of a risk. You don't shoot a high percentage. Yeah, get down in the paint.
Right.
Get your back to the basket and let's go to work. Let's play some ball. So
yeah, that's real basketball right there. So we are going to discuss both real and fake basketball by going into look at just kind of a random assortment of guys. I mean, all these guys have been all-stars, or one of them was never an all-star, but won the Sixth Man of the Year, I believe, 3 times. So, all some level of stardom, but all of them share one unique thing in which each of them appeared in just one game for a franchise. So somewhere along the line, they just played one game for a team, and we're going to look into the circumstances and instances of how that happened. So digging into some guys, old and new, so it should be fun.
Yeah, and obviously the idea, and there's probably a bunch of other guys that maybe we missed here. The key we were trying to look for is guys that at least had fun or interesting stories, and there are probably a few, like we said, that we may have missed, or a few guys that we didn't talk about. But we try to keep it to at least big time players, stars, as we said, stars with one game stints. Some guys at a little bit of a higher star level, and then some guys that were still stars when they had their one game stints, and then several that were former stars but still at the end of the day, at one point in these guys' career, they were known as top tier players, stars, all stars, championship winning players or whatnot. So that is the key. But I'm sure you can go through the list and find a bunch of dudes that played one game, with the franchise or whatever. But these were kind of the ones that we really picked out as the stars, really top tier players.
Yeah, exactly. So the first one, we're going to go way back to 1948. Kenny Sailors of the Chicago Stags. Yes, there was a Chicago Stags franchise in the old BAA, one of the forerunner leagues to the NBA. And Kenny Sailors, we have talked about him on the show before. He was a jump shot pioneer at the University of Wyoming, was one of the guys who really popularized the jump shot, first in college and then a bit in the NBA. Was a two-time college player of the year and a college basketball Hall of Famer. He was discussed heavily in a friend of the show, Sean Fury's book, Rise and Fire. So definitely a great read, and you can kind of dig more into Kenny there. But, Kenny started in the BAA after the war, like a lot of guys did, playing for the Cleveland Rebels, the good old Cleveland Rebels. Maybe I don't know if the baseball team should consider if they're going to change.
It's a great name.
What do you think of Rebels?
Yeah. When I was reading your notes a little bit earlier, I was like, ooh, everyone's on like the Spiders and all that sort of stuff. The Cleveland Rebels, that's a nice one. That's pretty good, as long as they don't make it Confederate flagged,
right?
Themed, which would not be. They're like, all right, look, we stopped with the Indians, and here's our new team, and it's like, oh no,
right.
like that's almost worse. Like, what are you guys doing? Like,
right?
Like, jeez.
So
they're like, what? You wanted us not to be the Indians? Like,
right?
No.
Yeah.
Go back to the Spiders. Spiders are good. You guys are the Spiders now.
Yeah.
So.
Spiders are great. Yeah. So they were the Rebels. It was the BA's inaugural season in 1947. He was the fifth leading scorer on that team. He's a guard, only 5'11". That was Ed Stefanski was getting the ball a lot for that team. So, or it's going to be Ed Sadowski, not Stefanski. Who am I thinking? Who's Stefanski?
What's his name? There is. I think it's Ed
There's an announcer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ed Sadowski. Ed Sadowski's he was a kind of a famed big man of the time, and he was getting the ball a lot, and he was scoring for the Rebels. They finished 30-30, made the playoffs, but lost to the Knicks in the playoffs. And the Rebels were one of 4 BAA teams that went out of business after the first season. So he's up for he's in the dispersal draft for the following season, and he is chosen by the Chicago Stags. The Stags were the finals runner-up in 1947. And then he played the very first game of the season with the Stags, finished with 0 points on 0 of 3 shooting. So not, only one game, but not the best game for him. And then he was sold to the Philadelphia Warriors, who were the defending champs. It's like, I'm going from the second best team to the best team in the league. All right, it's going to be great. And he played 2 games there, including one against his former Stags teammates. He averaged 2 points per game in those games. So not a lot of playing time. I'm going to go ahead and guess there. Then he went on to the Providence Steamrollers, and played pretty well. He averaged 12.7 points per game, 345 true shooting percentage, which sounds bad, but the league average was 337. So he was actually average.
Right. That's pretty damn good, actually. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, unfortunately, the Steamrollers, they went 6-42 on the season. So not a great record. I think that was definitely set a record for a long time for worst winning percentage in the league until the 76ers, broke that record in 73. Their highlight, perhaps, was getting 2 games out of their coach, Nat Hickey, who is the oldest player in BAA NBA history at age 45 years, 363 days. So he just won, I think his last game was just 1 or 2 days shy of his 46th birthday. And a fun fact is that he was born in 1902, Nat Hickey was. The next oldest player whoever played in the BA or NBA was born in 1913. So 11 years passed between the oldest and the second oldest player in BA NBA history. So that's a fun fact right there.
Very old. Yeah, that's an old man.
Yes.
And what's also interesting too is, in that era, you go back and look at even old baseball and old basketball and old sports. There's not a lot of, guys, that age. We're talking, we're recording this just days, prior to the Super Bowl where, Tom Brady, who's 40 plus years old, is going to, be in his whatever, fucking 11th or whatever Super Bowl, who knows? It doesn't matter at this point because I don't really care and I don't really watch football. But, that like guys now, and he, keeps meticulous care of his body and everything that goes into his body, he's well aware of. And he's, and LeBron, who spends millions of dollars to make sure that his body's ready to go. And even like a Vince Carter, a recently retired Vince Carter, who did everything he could to hang on until he was 41 and 40, and it's like 45, like that's so old. And I do wonder if we will ever see that broken. I think LeBron seems like one, but it's easy to say that now we're still, 7 or 8 years from that, which, in hindsight seems like it's going to be pretty tough for LeBron. Or even, God, are we even 10 years away from LeBron? He's like 36, right? 35, 36.
Yeah, I think he turned 36 in December. So yeah,
another decade of LeBron. Like, I can't imagine that. Like, that would be, I mean, I guess the way around that would be, you retire for a few years or you don't really play and then you come back. But like, still, that's, I mean, it's remarkable achievement by Ned Hickey.
Yes. So I am trying to look it up real quick. Yeah. So the second person to play after age 40 was Bob Cousy, of course, who played 7 games, made a comeback in the 1970 season. The third person to play past age 40 was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who did it, in 88 and 89, playing until age 42. So, in basically 40 years of pro basketball history, only 3 guys played past age 40. Now there's a handful of guys, not that many, only really a dozen or so who have played past age 40. So a remarkable achievement, particularly during that time. So anyway, back to, as I mentioned, Kenny Sailors. He earned a second team All BAA for a slightly improved Providence Steamrollers team in 1949. They finished 12 and 48. So not great, but certainly better, doubled their wins. So the Steamrollers, despite the smashing success they had, they would fold, and Sailors would then have his best statistical season in his next stop in 1950 for the original Denver Nuggets. Not the same Nuggets as we have today, but this was the first iteration of them. They'd actually recently moved into professional basketball from the amateur circuit, where they'd had a lot of success. Sailors had 17.3 points per game on 43% true shooting, which was also above league average, and 4 assists per game. Again, the team's success not strong. The Nuggets would finish 11 and 51. So, he endured 3 pretty rough, seasons in terms of team success, despite, pretty good success individually. Sailors then the next year, he'd split time between the Celtics, which was in Red Auerbach's first year, and the original Baltimore Bullets. And you might think, well, yeah, his pro career was a tad disappointing, especially for a guy who was a 2-time college player of the year. But, living well is the best revenge. And he lived until a ripe old age of 95, and he passed away in 2016.
There you go. That's living. Yeah, that's living for sure. And again, we mentioned at the top, but the Sean Fury book, Rise and Fire, does a lot. If you ever want to know everything you need to know about Kenny Sailors and his career, it is all in there. We just did a little snippet there, but that book does a tremendous job of telling his story, and also the challenges of being a jump shooter coming into the NBA, being like, "Hey, I do this thing that's pretty good," and everybody being like, "Yeah, no, not here." And that's in high school, he's like, "Hey, I can jump and take shots," and they're like, "Yeah, no, you're not going to do that here." And then in college, being like, "Hey, I can jump and take shots," and they're like, "Yeah, you're not going to do that here." And then he does it, and he ends up becoming a college player of the year, and it's like, "Oh, maybe this thing works." And then he basically restarts in the NBA, where people are like, "Yeah, no, you're not going to do that here. That's not going to happen." Until later in his career, where it starts to get adapted a little bit, and teams do start kind of realizing the power of it. But by the time that happens, Sailors is already in his 30s or whatever. So revolutionary in a sense, but never a guy that I think is given enough credit for being the first guy, because he just wasn't. The pro career wasn't successful enough for people to say, "Oh, well, it's all Kenny Sailors is the reason why." I mean, people that really know the inner workings of the jump shot and the history of the jump shot will point to Kenny Sailors. But yeah, as far as your common fan, would pretty much not know who he is, because the pro career just wasn't significant enough on any level.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And Sean, not just Sailors, but lots of guys, who were influential in development of the jump shot. He gets into it. It's a fantastic book. Definitely check it out if you stuff. So, yeah.
All right. So our next guy here is Rasheed Wallace. And this is a really unique case for what we're going to talk about throughout the rest of the show, because he's a star in his prime. And every other instance that we talked about there with Kenny Sailors, he's kind of bouncing around a little bit. He's bouncing around during his, kind of so-so NBA career. A bunch of the other guys we're going to talk about throughout this episode are guys that, it'll kind of be one of the last legs or one of the final legs of their career. This is a star in his prime, a guy who later that year would be, influence the NBA Finals as arguably his team's best player, a bona fide all-star, and really, I would say the all-time one game with a team guy is Rasheed Wallace for the Atlanta Hawks, right? That's the one that everybody knows, everybody's aware of. Any list that's like, these guys, can you believe that these players played for these teams? It's always Rasheed Wallace. He's always listed among these. I guess I'll pose the question to you, Jason. Is he the all-time one game with the team guy, Rasheed Wallace?
Certainly it's the best known, and I think, you look at just the impact. Just he of all of these, he definitely, a lot of these were just short appearances or guys at the end of their career, at the very beginning of their career. Yeah, he was definitely the one who was the bona fide star who really mattered a lot, and as you said, was one of the most important players who played in the league that season. So absolutely, yeah, I don't think there's really any other comparable cases. Some interesting ones for sure, but in terms of the biggest one, the one that's the best known, he absolutely is clearly that.
So we'll quickly recap Wallace's rocky career start, which has got its ups and downs. He's drafted by the Washington Bullets in the 1995 NBA draft, paired with their incumbent young star Chris Webber. At that time, Chris Webber obviously on his second team at this point. He went from the Warriors then to the Bullets. And it sounds like it should work, and it sounds like it should work great, but it kind of didn't. And I don't know if that's these guys. I don't know if it's their personalities. I don't know if it's also the Washington Bullets, who were kind of an absolute disaster. It's just, it always pains me that this Rasheed Wallace, Chris Webber thing was given like a year, and they're just like, well, this can't possibly work. And it's like, man, I really my vision, like, it would have sucked because they would have done it in Washington Wizards uniforms, and that would have just been tragedy for everybody. But
that's true, yeah.
Like, why didn't they not just say, hey, let's try this for maybe another year? Because, spoiler alert, they're going to trade him, for some old talent in Rod Strickland or Harvey Grant at this time. But yeah, I'm always wondering, like, why didn't they get a little bit more time between Webber and Wallace? But I guess Washington Bullets at the time were keen on making very rash, quick, and more times than not bad decisions during that era. So.
I mean, Strickland was an important player for them, so there is some validity to making the trade there. And they did actually, I think, make the playoffs, and that was like the first time they made the playoffs in quite a long time. So a little bit, you can kind of understand the thinking of that, but definitely, obviously in retrospect, both. Obviously, Wallace and Webber both had tremendous careers after leaving Washington. So there, seems like there's, some reason for that.
For sure. So then, of course, as I said, he is traded to Portland for Rod Strickland and Harvey Grant. As you said, that is kind of an immediate trade that helps out Washington. And it helps Portland as well, because Portland really starts going on some deep playoff runs with Wallace as a part of a pretty deep team. And most people know kind of the Rasheed Wallace era Portland Trailblazer stuff, combining with a ton of other talented players and a ton of other, really, really good, David Stoudemire comes over from the Portland or from the Toronto Raptors. You get a bunch of different Brian Grants there for a few years. Arvydas Sabonis finally comes over after like a decade or whatever. I mean, just combining a lot of kind of misfit toys into one thing, and then one thing works, and it's fun and it's interesting and it's really dynamic. Obviously you get Scottie Pippen when he's done with Houston and the Bulls, and they go on deep playoff runs. They arguably minutes away from going into an NBA Finals until Kobe and Shaq had other things to say about that and kind of stole that away. And you're always kind of wondering what would have happened with that team and kind of unseen, the heights that they could have reached or what they could have done, but they always seem to come up just short, and things started to kind of fall apart, obviously, a little bit, in the later years. And Rasheed Wallace, during this time, too, is not only just kind of coming into his own as a player, but gaining a reputation as a player that would get a lot of technical fouls and a lot of ejections along the way. And this one I found interesting because I completely forgot that this happened, and a little bit of vindication for Rasheed Wallace. I hope that the NBA sent him a nice letter. Wallace was also suspended by the NBA for 7 games when he threatened then NBA referee Tim Donaghy on an arena loading dock after a game in 2003. That was the league's longest suspension for an offense that did not involve violence or substance abuse. I hope that they, again, as I said, gave him those 7-game checks back, because he's like, look, Donnie, he's an asshole. I told you guys, like, this guy's not up on the up and up. I'm just trying to tell you. I'm just trying.
Right.
So
shady.
Vindicated for Rasheed Wallace. But it became a problem for sure with Rasheed. And really became, an issue for the Blazers in general. Their entire demeanor, whatever the hell you want to say about the Blazers in this era, they enjoyed a lot of recreational activities. Enjoyed
a lot of arrests, a lot of the local fans, a lot of them you started to not like the team and not like the personalities, and they were kind of bullies in the just like the not fun way. I guess it's the more fun way when you win, or when you kind of do it with a smile, for lack of a better term. But it was kind of like he was frustrated with the team. They were frustrated with him, and wanted to move on and move into a new era. And it worked fairly well for both teams. Obviously,
Absolutely.
Wallace eventually goes to the Pistons and does well, and the Blazers rebuild relatively soon after that with Brandon Royce. So it all kind of turns out to be work out fairly well.
Yeah, the Portland thing when they were winning 50 and 60 games or whatever was like, whatever, boys will be boys or whatever. But yeah, when they started winning like 43 games and 45 games, it's like, all right, everybody getting suspended and everybody getting ejected and everybody kind of doing it just wore thin, and it was time for kind of a change there.
Yeah, and it was kind of like a mix of just like some like knucklehead silly stuff, like Rasheed Wallace getting teases, whatever, who cares? But there was also like some domestic violence and some more serious, like actual like reckless, criminal, like horrible stuff, kind of and sometimes that stuff all kind of gets interspersed into one, negative aura, even though one is obviously kind of like, okay, whatever. And then one is obviously like a serious thing. So.
Right. But unfortunately, like you said, smoking weed and getting ejected was kind of on the same level as domestic violence at that point. Cause it was just like, the Jailblazers are at it again. And it's like, well, no, that guy's a criminal. Like that's actually bad. Like, no, that one guy is much, much worse than what these other guys are doing. But essentially it needed to all kind of go away. Everybody needed to kind of break up and go their separate ways, and that's what they did, and actually it ended up working out for like a lot of the players. Like Zach Randolph would have his little second run, Rasheed Wallace would have his little second run. Like a lot of these guys would go on to have like some pretty fun, interesting runs, apart from each other. But anyway, February 9th, 2004, Portland trades Rasheed Wallace to the Atlanta Hawks for Sharif Abdur-Rahim, Theo Ratliff, and Dan Dickau. So Rasheed Wallace is an Atlanta Hawk. That is not where he wants to go, but we'll talk about it here in a sec. Wallace will score 20 points in just 3 quarters in his Atlanta Hawks debut. 6 rebounds, 5 blocks. Seems like a good fit for Atlanta. They're kind of a team that's, they're not necessarily on the rise, but they have some talent. They got Jason Terry. They have a few guys on the roster. You can see the building blocks of that team, but it is not going to last. They do question Rasheed Wallace if, hey, do you really want to be in Atlanta? That kind of seems like a weird fit. And his quote, I found this from a Detroit newspaper. He says, as long as somebody's CTC, at the end of the day, I'm with them. For all you know that don't know what CTC means, that means cut the check. But if I have to go somewhere and play, I'm not going to sit up here and boo-hoo about it. No, because at the end of the day, I will still be able to do the things necessary to take care of my family. That's what the CTC means. Whoever cuts that check, that's who I have to play for. I guess that's a cool attitude. I like it. I mean,
yeah. Hey,
get paid. Who cares? Atlanta, whatever.
It's honest, yeah. So Rasheed came to the Hawks. I had just recently moved to Atlanta at the time that Rasheed came to the Hawks. Within probably like a month or two in there. So I was just sort of toying with the idea of becoming a Hawks fan. I didn't really start following the team until the next season. The 13 and 69, 2004, 2005 Atlanta Hawks that, we've mentioned many times in the show. The Josh Smith Hawks, who, you're going to talk about later, the Rasheed does net the Hawks the pick that gets them Josh Smith.
Yeah.
So, we're not done too, but in a sense. But yeah, that was obviously was a big deal at the time. The Hawks were kind of they were kind of a blah team. They were kind of leftover veterans from a team that had been better a few years ago, sort of like Portland, but not as successful, I guess. But they had a lot of older guys. They had some guys who had been just weren't vibing with the city, and they needed a change as well. So it'd been interesting to see if they had tried to go with Jason Terry and Rasheed Wallace, because again, that's not a bad foundation for a team. Those guys obviously went on to big success in the second half of the decade, so maybe that could have worked out, but the Hawks were not a super well-run organization at the time.
Yeah, so that one game is going to be February 18th, 2004. And again, the minute he's traded to Atlanta, it's already people being like, does Rasheed Wallace really want to play in Atlanta? Like, that seems like a weird thing. And apparently, according to some different people, that is not true. At least Chris Broussard of the New York Times, a very famous, not always correct reporter, says here, and his source is, I guess, a decent enough source here, but he says, Wallace is quoted in this New York Times article saying, right now, it's about Atlanta. It says Wallace will become a free agent after the season. I'm not worried about the end of the season. So this is all kind of this thing where Rasheed Wallace is going to become a free agent at the end of the year. And okay, the Atlanta has him now, But even if they say, hey, here's a max deal. Hey, Rasheed, do you really want to stay in Atlanta? Is he going to stay in Atlanta? And it was a deal that they, made, to see, hey, maybe we'll see what can happen. Maybe we can retain him. Maybe we can, change his mind or whatever. This, according to Bill Strickland, Rasheed Wallace's agent at the time in this Chris Broussard article, says that his goal was to have Wallace on the Knicks roster before today's 3 p.m. trade deadline. So Rasheed Wallace's agent wants him on the New York Knicks. Rasheed Wallace wants to be wherever the check is being cut. And it ended up that he's going to Detroit. It's a 3-team deal here, February 19th, 2004, 3-team trade. Same day as that actual game that he plays, 3-team trade, where the Boston Celtics are going to trade Chris Mills to the Atlanta Hawks. The Boston Celtics are going to trade Mike James to the Detroit Pistons. Detroit Pistons are going to trade, it was Zello Rabaka. I know it was Rabaka, but I forget. Raka, I forget how to pronounce his first name, but it doesn't matter. He was not very good. Bob Sura and a 2004 first-round pick, later to be Josh Smith, would actually come around and bite the Detroit Pistons in the ass in the end. They decided, you know what? Damn it, we traded him a bunch of years ago. Let's get him back and let's have him be a three-point shooter for some reason. And
why not?
Didn't work very well. But Detroit Pistons trades Rabaka, Bob Sura, and that 2004 first-round pick that would end up becoming Josh Smith. And the Detroit Pistons trade Chucky Atkins, Lindsey Hunter, and a 2004 first-round pick, eventually Tony Allen, to the Boston Celtics. So Atlanta, of course, gets some big picks, like you said, picks that would end up kind of building their next decade there with Josh Smith in particular. Sure. Boston Celtics get a decent defender in Tony Allen, who would be a big part of a title team. So there are a lot of really talented players moving around here. And, of course, the biggest one is going to be Rasheed Wallace, who goes to the Detroit Pistons. Detroit had been a very good team over the last few years, had been knocking on the door of the NBA Finals, and this would, of course, work out well for Detroit as an understatement, because they would win the 2004 NBA Finals. And Wallace, I mean, this is kind of always up for debate when everybody kind of says, like, oh, it was a team of, like, everybody was, like, great and everybody was equal. But to me, if you really look at the numbers, you look at the impact or whatever, to me, Wallace was arguably the team's most complete player, the guy that kind of did everything. And I don't know that team... They got close. Obviously they were in the Eastern Conference Finals many, many times. They were right on the doorstep. I don't think this team wins the finals without a Rasheed Wallace, and I think he just took them to that next level. And it's clear that he did. I mean, obviously, look at the years prior, and then look at the year they got him.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were much better. He completed them and basically made them fit together, well, and. It was the perfect marriage of exactly what they needed. And yeah, they win the championship that year, and they go to the Eastern Conference Finals for like the next 5 years, and are a championship contender, pretty much that whole time. So, absolutely one of the best in-season trades. I think we've talked about it before. One of the best in-season trades in NBA history, and absolutely terrific. One thing I want to mention about the game. That Rasheed played with the Hawks for a moment is that the starting lineup for the Hawks there, Jason Terry, Rasheed Wallace, Steven Jackson, Joel Prisbilla, and Boris Diaw. Now, like, if that's like a 2007 team, that's like basketball Twitter's like dream right there, Yeah. I mean, Prisbilla was a pretty decent, like, shot blocking, like, bouncy big man.
Yeah, and that's in those days. Yeah, Prisbilla was solid in those days. He was just this big. Yeah. He was like shaped like a brick, and he just like blocked everything that came near the basket. That's what you wanted. Yeah, you wanted out of your centers.
Right, he's a fun guy to watch, and those other guys, of course, are basketball. I mean, that would have been like a really high IQ, like fun, like tough, like that could have been the team that upset. That could have easily been the similar to the Warriors, of that. We believe Warriors. That could have been a version of that team for sure. Maybe even a little bit better, to be honest, with Rasheed there. So
no, for sure. Yeah, no, I was like that. I was like those early 2000s Hawks teams. But anyway, so when all kind of dust settles there, Atlanta, why do they do it? Well, they acquired Wallace. They cleared cap space. Then cleared cap space again by trading Wallace over to Detroit. So they had $20 million in cap space to I don't know really what to do, because the next
They got Antoine Walker. What are you talking about?
Oh, that's right. Oh, God damn it. I forgot that. Right, because they traded Jason Terry and everybody to get Antoine Walker.
Yeah.
So,
Antoine Walker.
And then a year later we get Joe Johnson. So, okay. All right.
Yeah. It was a plan. Hey, Billy Knight, he had a plan.
The plan was give all money to Antoine Walker. Well, you know what? Hey, good plan, I guess. Didn't end up working for Atlanta, but,
get as many 6'9" guys as you can. And
see what happens. He was ahead of the game. He was 20 years too early. 20 years too early for sure.
Yeah.
I should note here that Rasheed Wallace, to endear himself both to Jason and I, not that he needed to anyway, because we're both big Rasheed Wallace fans, he paid for a replica WWE World Heavyweight titles to be made for each of his teammates and then presented them as gifts when the next season started after their title team. So thank you, Rasheed Wallace. Following year after the Pistons title, he signed a 5-year, $57 million contract, remains in Detroit. As we said, helped him return to Eastern Conference Finals 5 more times or whatever, a bunch more times. Finally leaves the team in July 2009 to sign with the Boston Celtics, a thing that I kind of forget ever happened, and it's probably for the better that we did. The run did not go very well. June 25th, 2010, Rasheed Wallace retires from the NBA. Then he will come back 2 years later to play for the New York Knicks, very famous, with the Carmelo and I think Jeremy Lin years, which is funny because you're like, that's Rasheed. He was like fine, he wasn't great, but he was fine. He was okay. He was a decent enough player, especially 2 years out of the league. But then eventually he's going to retire again April 17th, 2013, and that is it for one Rasheed Wallace. Yeah,
that team they had Melo, they had Ray Felton, they had Tyson Chandler, they had Jason Kidd, they had young Shumpert, Pablo Prigioni, Kurt Thomas, Kenyon Martin, Marcus Camby. They had a lot of guys on that team. A lot of guys.
Marcus Camby too? Damn. I forgot that they had Marcus Camby too.
Only 24 games. I don't know if he
got
traded or
those are guys. Yeah, there's just a lot of dudes. Right.
Quentin Richardson played 1 game for that team. Amari played 29 games for that team.
So they have a remarkable. I'm looking at this team. They have a remarkable thing that like every one of their guys is a guy. Like you know what I mean. Like James White is the most anonymous guy in that entire team. Yeah, and like the rest of the dudes are dudes. Guys Like Chris Copeland, I guess, is another one, and Earl Barron. But like, there's like 15 guys that are like, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. All right, that's funny.
They were fun. That was the one of the few times in my entire life that I've actually had fun watching the New York Knicks.
Right, that was
that year.
Yeah, the 1 year they were actually really good in the last 20 years. They were pretty good the insanity year, but they were better this year actually. So post insanity. Anyway, enough about the Knicks. So let's move on to George Carter. So I have to admit that sometimes I get George Carter and Fred Carter confused because they both played, late 60s into the 70s. Mm-hmm. Similar names. I'm old. My brain is addled. I get mixed up sometimes. So to clarify here, Fred, he was a guard named Mad Dog, nicknamed Mad Dog. Or Doggy. Spent most of his career with the Bullets and the Sixers. He's affectionately known as the best player on the worst team ever because he was on the 73 Sixers that won 9 games. And also then had a lengthy career as a coach and a TV analyst. And also apparently helped popularize the fist bump, which we'll have to dive into that one at another time.
My God, I'll put a pin in that one. That's an entire show. We got to figure out the history of the fist bump and how he decided. Like someone was like, "Hey, high five," and he's like, "Nah."
No.
Maybe he was ahead of the game about like infectious diseases. He was like, "Nah, man, that's a really good way to spread infectious diseases."
Yeah, fist bump is better. The sweat doesn't touch directly. Yeah. So, So we got George, who we're focused on here. George, he was a swingman. His nickname was Dirty Dingus, not a dirty term. He played mostly in the ABA for 6 different teams. He was an all-star in 1971 for the Virginia Squires. He had almost 19 points per game and 8 rebounds per game. He had I'm using this stat for the first time. We're going to experiment with it and see how it goes. So he had 103 league-adjusted true shooting percentage. That is a relatively new stat on Basketball Reference. So basically, that just means that he was above average true shooting. So if 100 would be average true shooting, he had 103. So it was better than 3 points better than average or whatever in terms of adjusted true shooting. So anyway, that's what that means. So. But again, he played for the ABA for his entire career, except for one game, his very first game. The one that we're going to talk about was his first ever pro game, playing for the Detroit Pistons against the Cincinnati Royals on October 17th, 1967. George scored 3 points with 1 assist, playing in 5 minutes for the Pistons, and a 131-108 drubbing of the Royals. First game of the season for both teams. George had been drafted in the 8th round, 81st overall in the draft by the Pistons. He also was drafted by the Buffalo Bills of I think they may have been in the AFL at that point, or maybe they just got into the NFL. I don't know. I forget when the merger was. And also the New York Mets. So 3 sports was drafted in, but he chose pro basketball. But he only played for 1 game before I unfortunately couldn't really find the details of exactly how this worked, but he was required to serve 2 years in the Army before he returned to pro basketball. I don't know if this was, because of Vietnam and he was drafted, or if he had some sort of other reason for the obligation, or was in the reserve or whatever. But he was in the Army for 2 years, then returned to pro basketball, going to the ABA, and they remained in the ABA through 1976, but unfortunately didn't find a role once the merger occurred. He was age 32, of course, near the end for most athletes' career at that point. And there's a really terrific, heart-wrenching story that was done by the Indy Star. We'll try to include a link to it in the show notes, because George actually just passed away fairly recently, November 2020. Unfortunately, he was penniless. He, because he only played that 1 game in the ABA, didn't qualify for an NBA pension. But he was helped along the way by the Dropping Dimes Foundation and Scott Tarter, who we've had on the show previously, and they do a lot of great work, of course, for helping former ABA athletes and advocating for those guys to be able to be included in the NBA pension program, which would be an awesome thing for the NBA to do, and relatively low amount of money to pay for, considering the amount of money that they make. So it's a great read. It's very, very sad. That somebody who was such he was especially a huge college star, and was a guy who was fairly important player in basketball history. Unfortunately, fell on hard times, and didn't have a lot of people in his life to care for him toward the end. But he was. He did get some people sort of toward the end to kind of take care of him, and he's going to eventually, I believe, his remains are going to be buried on the campus of the St. Bonaventure.
Awesome!
Where he was a star. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it stinks, when lives, people's lives go that way, and we always, today's athletes, obviously most of them will not end up like this, given what they made, in their playing career, and given now how the NBA is so much more aware of what happens, in the post-playing career for all their players. It's good to know that situations like this hopefully will happen very, very less, or much less than they did in this era. But yeah, it is unfortunate because Carter is one of many, many players that has unfortunately kind of had this same sort of end to his life. So, it's good that, they were obviously able to help him a little bit in the final few days there, but, and the Dropping Dimes Foundation, obviously they do incredible work. So, good to hear that, but yeah, a little tragic that, his year, his life ended, so sad after having such a cool career. So, we'll move on now to, Tom Chambers. Yes, Philadelphia 76er Tom Chambers. I legitimately had never known about this run until we were doing research for this piece, and I saw Tom Chambers. I'm like, no, 76ers, really? It happened. It's true. We'll get to it here in a sec. He is drafted by the San Diego Clippers in the 1981 NBA draft. Immediately becomes the team's top scorer. Though they're the Clippers, even if they're in San Diego, it doesn't matter. They're still the Clippers, because in true Clippers fashion, they draft Terry Cummings the following year and decide that, goddamn, we just can't have 2 good players at once. So, Chambers, you're out of here, pal.
Right.
Hey, we got 1 good player. Let's get another good player. We can only have 1 good player. Get this guy out of here.
Yeah.
Just keep
ridiculous.
Tom Chambers. What are you doing? I'm sure trying to save, $1,000 or something like that. So
right. They can't have 2 forwards. That's ridiculous.
Right. How do you play with 2, 2 guys that play relatively the same position and both are good players that can score a lot. So.
Right. No,
well, luckily Tom Chambers would only go on to have another decade of high level performance in the NBA that the Clippers got nothing out of. So anyway, he's on the move. He joins a talented Seattle Supersonics team with Gus Williams and Jack Sikma. Not a good team at this point, but a decent enough team here where the team's not gonna win a ton, but really break through in 1987. where despite winning just 39 games, they make a run to the Western Conference Finals. They're swept 4-0 by the Lakers. And that year, Tom Chambers scores the then career-high 23.3 points per game, makes an All-Star game. Go on to win the All-Star game MVP that year as well. He scored 34 points in the game. Kind of an all-time famous, All-Star game performance there where Tom Chambers just trying a lot harder than most other people were trying in the All-Star game and got an MVP because of it. So good for him. But perhaps Chambers' most famous run is going to come, though, as he joins the Phoenix Suns. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about a little bit here. This is also historic as it opens the floodgates for restricted free agency as well. This is not exactly the topic we were going to talk about, but an interesting thing here is, and you could look it up by, there's a Fox Sports article that did a really good job kind of digging into it, but I'll just read from this article here. It says, Players Union rep Larry Fleischer came to Chambers' agent telling him to pump the brakes on an assumed agreement to re-up in Seattle after the team made him a qualifying offer. Fleischer called my agent and said, hey, hold off on signing with the Sonics because we think we've got something coming down the pike here that may be revolutionary for the NBA. So Chambers said, so we did. A short time later, a revision to the CBA was finalized, allowing certain veteran players the right to unrestricted free agency. The conditions dictated that a player had to have been through played through two contracts, and have at least 7 NBA seasons. Chambers at the time met both of those requirements and would later become a test subject for countless free agents to come, and obviously still today, because Tom Chambers then goes, oh, okay, I can go wherever I want then, cool. And he ends up going to the Phoenix Suns. So he joins a team then that the prior year had only won 23 games. In 1989, they break through under new coach Cotton Fitzsimmons. They win 55 games, make a run to the Western Conference Finals. Chambers is going to lead the team in scoring at 25.7 points per game. But the team's solid as hell all around. Is just a really, really cool. And really, that's what would be the theme of the Suns throughout the late 80s and the early 90s. Just super deep teams. Because, this year here that we're talking about in, 1989, you got Eddie Johnson, Kevin Johnson, Armin Gilliam, Jeff Hornacek, Dan Marley, Tyrone Corbin, young Steve Kerr. Like, there's a lot of really cool talent on these teams, but they break through, but they make it to the Western Conference Finals, where again Chambers would continue to lose to teams that are better than him, mostly teams that were the Los Angeles Lakers. So that ended up not working out great. In 1990, Chambers puts together arguably his best season ever. He scores 27.7 points per game. Cotton Fitzsimmons says, "Just shoot it, dude. Just score, go nuts, go crazy," and he does. The team wins 54 games. Once again, makes us to the Western Conference Finals, but this time they don't lose to the Lakers. They lose to Portland. They lose to the Portland Trail Blazers in 6 games. 1993, obviously, Phoenix is going to add Charles Barkley, and Chambers is going to take a reduced role as a result of Charles Barkley coming in, which, Charles Barkley, one of the best players in the league at that time. Tom Chambers getting a little bit older, but decides, hey, I'll take a lesser role to get this new guy included here. And it works out well because he becomes the team's 6th man, and then they break through, of course, the Suns, make it all the way to the finals before losing to the Chicago Bulls on kind of an all-time great NBA final. But that would be it for Tom Chambers in Phoenix. The following season, he's going to move on to Utah. That's where he played college ball as well, and he'd be the backup to Karl Malone. Once again, you guessed it, Tom Chambers in the Western Conference Finals, and once again, he's going home before the finals. Does not make it past the Houston Rockets. Then in 1995, unfortunately, the bottom starts to fall out of Chambers. He averages under 10 points per game for the first time in his career. His minutes plummet to only 15.3 minutes per game. He also turns 35, so he's had a long career at this point, and things are not obviously going super well at this point. So 1996, he decides, I'm done with the NBA. He's going to go to Maccabi Tel Aviv in Israel, play with them, and hey, he breaks through. He wins a title. They win an Israeli League Championship. They compete pretty well in the Euro League. In addition, and then in 1997, he decides to come back to the NBA with another stint and a beginning with the Charlotte Hornets, the 1997 Charlotte Hornets. Yes, so this is a Greensboro.com article here. It says, anticipating another run of injuries and a possible aborted playoff run, the Charlotte Hornets acquired veteran Tom Chambers on Thursday to join the depleted Hornets roster. Quote, I think people thought I died and gone away or something, says Chambers. Chambers retired after the season last year, but quickly realized he had made a mistake. I saw that I was as good or better than some of these guys who were in the NBA, and I thought, why not? Chambers said, this is my first love, obviously, and it's what made me what I am and who I am. So he comes with a renewed vigor to the Charlotte Hornets, and it only lasts 12 games, then he's waived. So it does not end up being a great run for him, but it's not over because he is once again picked up by the Phoenix Suns, his team that he carved out so much of his time with. But he ends up not playing a single game for the Suns because they then trade him to the Philadelphia 76ers. And I was going to kind of wait to talk about this wrinkle of the story, but I'll get to it right now. So he's in Phoenix. He doesn't obviously play a game for Phoenix, and the big reason why is, and this is from this article, in Phoenix several weeks ago, Chambers punched Suns strength and conditioning coach Robin Pound. It's a Ironic name to get punched. The NBA Players Union, in the aftermath of Latrell Sprewell's attack on Warriors coach PJ Carlissimo, complained that Chambers was punished by neither the league nor the Suns. So they decided, okay, we won't punish him. We'll just trade him. So that's when he ends up getting traded to the Philadelphia 76ers. And he's going to finish his 16-year NBA career as a member of the 1998 Philadelphia 76ers, a fascinating team that has 22 players suit up for them. Constant turmoil, the Philadelphia 76ers at this time, trying to figure out how to build around Allen Iverson, whether to build around Allen Iverson, what the hell to do, what their path forward is going to be. Larry Brown's in, and, this is his first year in. But this is a fascinating team. You got, Allen Iverson, and then here are the guys that play for the team that year. You have Derek Coleman plays for the team that year. Jerry Stackhouse plays for the team that year. Jim Jackson, Tim Thomas, Joe Smith, Clarence Weatherspoon, and then a bunch of random veterans that come in and out at random times, including Brian Shaw, the aforementioned Terry Cummings, the reunion of Terry Cummings and Tom Chambers. Yeah. Benoit Benjamin. Unfortunately, this was a decade, 14 years after they were both good. So it doesn't end up working very well for the Philadelphia 76ers. But Tom Chambers plays one game, November 26, 1997, with the Philadelphia 76ers. He scores 6 points on 2 of 2 shooting, 3 steals, and 2 rebounds. Not bad. Not bad at all. But I don't know.
So Terry Cummings in that game, 13 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals, man. Yeah. That's some good times. Yeah, Cummings and Chambers.
The best part is in 1998, if you put Terry Cummings and Tom Chambers on the Los Angeles Clippers, I think they'd still be some of the best players on that team. Especially the late 90s Clippers are a lot like every other Clippers team besides the Chris Paul Clippers. They were bad. So very, very bad. But that's it. I never knew about the 76ers run, and I never knew that Tom Chambers punched the strength and conditioning coach.
Fortunately for Tom, it worked out. He was able to later become a community relations representative for the Suns. So he was able to get employment back with the team. So fun times there. Yeah, no, that's a good one. I didn't know that one either as well. So nice little nugget there.
And you probably I mentioned the name there, Robin Pound. And if you follow the NBA at any level and remember I think he's still there. He was still there as of a few years ago. He's got a big black beard. He's one of the Suns. You see him on the Suns bench all the time. And he's been there for years and years and years. And obviously he's well regarded. I mean, a lot of guys will go to for many, many years would go to the Suns, when they had injury issues, because he obviously was very well regarded. But on that particular day, did not see eye to eye with one Tom Chambers. So there you go.
Hopefully they mended fences.
I think so, yeah. In the article that I read, they said that it was kind of handled internally. So,
right.
I don't know. Maybe they had Robin Pound punch Tom Chambers once and said, "Okay,
sure,
we're leaving now."
Maybe.
So.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to be Pound foolish. So.
Yeah, right.
Jesus. On that note, let's go to Tony Jackson for the Minnesota Pipers of the ABA. Now, Tony Jackson. He was another, big college star. He was the MVP of the 1959 NIT when he played for St. John's. This was when the NIT was as big or even bigger than the NCAA tournament at the time, because it was played at Madison Square Garden. Unfortunately, he was blackballed from the NBA after he'd been drafted by the Knicks. Kind of a similar situation to, Connie Hawkins at the time. Both of them were, New York area guys, caught up in a, gambling scandal. Jackson was accused basically of failing to report a bribe offer that he had refused. So he didn't accept the bribe. He just didn't report the offer that he gave it. That was enough for the NBA. They're like, no, we're not going to include these guys. Too bad, so sad. Tony Jackson was, like Hawkins, did find a role in the ABL, the American Basketball League, that was opened by Abe Saperstein in the early 60s, and he was quite the three-point pioneer. He shot 518 three-point attempts in 99 games. Made 35% of them, so really good.
That's really
percentage.
Good.
Yeah.
Especially in that era. Yeah.
Right. No NBA player would average that many three-point attempts per game until Michael Adams did it in 1989. So 25 years before that, we had Tony Jackson shooting at that many threes, in a professional league. So Only 3 players did at that level in the ABA. So, it's a very rare occurrence up until, about the early 90s or so. And he once scored 53 points on 12 three-pointers made in the ABL. So, capable of big scoring bursts. I think he was playing that league when he was 19, 20 years old, so extremely young. And then at age 25, he later would join the ABA as it began play. The ABA was open to, Hawkins and Tony Jackson and Roger Brown, the guys who'd been blackballed, in that unfairly in that scandal. And he plays really well for the New Jersey Americans, who are now the Nets franchise in the ABA's first season. 19.4 points per game, 6.8 rebounds, only 30% 3-point shooting. So the percentage was down on about 4 attempts per game. And he also, during that season, he set the ABA record for free throws in a game with 24. So, season 1 goes really well. Season 2, things go a little bit awry for Tony. So he starts off with 3 games with the Nets, and then he is traded, I believe, for a draft pick. I couldn't find out officially, but he was traded to the defending champion Minnesota Pipers. Minnesota, the Pipers, they were starring Connie Hawkins. They'd moved from Pittsburgh for reasons that are too stupid to discuss here. But anyway, they were Minnesota. In his 1 game for the Pipers, he did not register any recorded stats. It was a big win for the Pipers against the New Jersey Americans, who were now officially, I believe, they were the New York Nets. So they moved to New York and they become the Nets. But they were not good. Which, they lost one of the best players, so why would they be good? For basically nothing. Then, after that game, he was, again, traded to the Houston Mavericks. The Houston Mavericks would later become the Carolina Cougars and then later become, I think more famously, the Spirits of St. Louis. But they began their play in Houston. He ended up having a reduced role on the last place team. At that point, he decided to call it a career, and he passed away at only age 65 in 2005. But there was a cool quote in his obituary from the New York Times. It was actually a quote he had given to Newsday. He said, "I have this belief: when you're created and brought to this earth, there's a plan for you. There was the plan for me. You're bitter for a while, but hey, there's life afterward. I didn't want to become a bitter person." So, unfortunately, he was blackballed from the NBA, didn't get a chance to become the star that he definitely seemed like he had the potential to become, but, still carved out his niche and did some pretty interesting things.
Yeah, you do kind of hope that, with maybe a more stable league in the ABA, he could have carved out a nice little career, even if, he had never ever was able to go to the NBA or ever kind of, let in. It's just, the Nets, the Nets / Americans trading him to the Pipers make no sense because he was like really good and a pretty important part of their team. And obviously like that's kind of the day when he decided, you know what, I'm kind of, and especially, growing up in the area, he was local, all that sort of stuff. And it's like, fuck, I got a Minnesota and like, what am I doing here? Houston, like, it kind of, you could see in his numbers, you could see in just the way he retired and the way he kind of petered out is that it just, the love kind of got lost after that, after he gets moved from the Nets. It's just like, all right, what am I even doing here? So,
right. Yeah. Maybe there was injuries,
it's so hard to know. It's so hard to know with these ABA guys, what happens, but And
it wasn't like there was huge money at that point either. So maybe he had a better offer. Who knows? But,
sure. Right.
Regardless, yes. Nevertheless, he did do some notable things.
Yeah, and he's a very famous St. John's. I'm almost positive they retired his number.
One of the top 3 or 4 players, I think, of all time. Sure.
So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, so move on to Jamal Crawford, Brooklyn Net. Jamal Crawford, one of this podcast's favorite players of all time, Jamal Crawford.
Oh, yeah.
Played high school ball at Rainier Beach High School in the Seattle region, which has really become a hotbed of talent. I mean, that high school alone has produced Doug Christie, Nate Robinson, Terrence Williams, Kevin Porter Jr., and DeJounte Murray, in addition to Jamal Crawford. So that's some nice company there. And that entire region obviously has spurned a lot of really good players over the last few decades, with the help a lot of times of Jamal Crawford, which we'll talk about here a little bit. But his number 23 is retired by Rainier Beach High. Anyway, he is selected 8th overall by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the very horrendous 2000 NBA draft. He's immediately traded to the Chicago Bulls for Chris Mim. It ends up working a little bit better, I'd say, for the Bulls than it did for the Cavaliers, because Chris Mim was just okay and Jamal Crawford ended up being pretty good. But I guess you could argue that the Bulls didn't get the full totality of Jamal Crawford's powers. But either way, probably a win for the Bulls there, trading Chris Mim for Jamal Crawford. In the first year, it did not look that way, though, because Crawford struggled a lot, shooting only 35% from the field during his first year. He only averaged 4.6 points per game. His second year did not go much better either. While he improved to 9.3 points per game, he only played 23 games as a result of a bunch of injuries as well. The third year, that's when things are going to kind of come together for Jamal Crawford a little bit. The Bulls, who are still rebuilding after the Jordan years, they move on from Tim Floyd, their kind of handpicked coach after Phil Jackson, and they move to former player Bill Cartwright, who comes in, installs a new system, and really kind of speaks to Jamal Crawford, and Jamal Crawford kind of likes what he's hearing here, because we see the scoring rise up to 10.7 points per game, and then 2.3 rebounds per game for Crawford. His fourth season, though, that's when things really kind of start emerging, and the Crawford that we know and love really starts becoming what it is, because at that point Bill Cartwright and the Bulls realize, okay, this guy's not a point guard, this guy's not a take it down the court and pass it guy, he's a scorer. Give him the green light, let's go, and the scoring increases a bunch to 17.3 points per game. April 11th, 2004, he has his first 50-point game, 24 points in the fourth quarter as well during that. And then the Bulls decide, you know what, we're done with this. And they trade him to the New York Knicks before the 2005 season. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And Jamal Crawford really never kind of found his footing with that Bulls team. And that was true of a lot. I mean, Tyson Chandler would be moved on pretty shortly thereafter. Eddie Curry would be moved on shortly thereafter. Like they just, like, all the guys that they rebuilt with, they kind of wanted a clean slate with those, and wanted instead, your Ben Gorans and your Kirk Heinrichs. And this also was the same time that they did a big ownership or big GM switch from Jerry Krause to John Paxson. So a lot of stuff happening at this point. But anyway, Jamal Crawford is packaged with Jerome Williams to the New York Knicks for Dikembe Mutombo, Thella Harrington, Frank Williams, and Cesar Trubansky. Dikembe, of course, would never play a game for the Chicago Bulls, but he's one of my first picks when people say, hey, who are random guys that played on teams that you don't remember, or guys that got traded to teams you don't remember. And I always bring up Dikembe Mutombo, who was a Chicago Bull at least for like a few weeks, but never ended up actually suiting up for the team, because he's pretty quickly thereafter, by his own request of saying, hey, I really don't want to play for your crappy team, Chicago, so could you please try to move me? And they do. They trade him to Houston for Eric Piakowski, Adrian Griffin, and Mike Wilkes. But we're not talking about Dikembe Mutombo. We're talking about Jamal Crawford, because then he would go to New York and play there for several years, including his career year in 2008 when he started 80 games and got a season average up over 20 points per game at 20.8. He scores a career high 52 points on January 26th, 2007. As well. The Knicks, though, decide into the 2009 season, just a few games in the 2009 season, that they are going to trade Jamal Crawford to the Golden State Warriors for Al Harrington. This, of course, is the Don Nelson 2.0 Warriors, his return to the Warriors, the vestiges of the We Believe Warriors. And it ends up working pretty well in the short term, because December 20th, 2008, Crawford scores 50 points for the Golden State Warriors, becoming only the fourth player in history to score 50-plus with three different teams. He joined Wilt Chamberlain, Bernard King, and Moses Malone. I mean, that look, think of the company that Jamal Crawford's in there. Wilt Chamberlain, Bernard King, and Moses Malone. And Jamal Crawford. Like, I love it. Just great. Like 6 foot, 155 pound Jamal. You know what I mean? Like, just this little guy. And Wilt and Moses, and then Bernard King, obviously one of the most athletic, skilled players of his era. And then Jamal Crawford. It's just, I love it. It's great. That's why we love this guy.
Yeah, I mean, three great players and one legend right there.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Unfortunately, he's traded again, this time to Jason's Atlanta Hawks. For AC Law, the man who was in the news over the last few weeks when Steph Curry told his new rookie James Wiseman, hey, look, at one point I even started, AC Law started over me. So look, like, going to the bench is not a bad thing. And for AC Law, I'd be like, oh man, like,
Yeah.
And which is cool because it created this initial everybody laughing at AC Law and then coming back with everybody being like, I mean, he was a good player. I mean, he was good, but he's not Steph Curry. Like,
basketball. Yeah, right. Yeah. So
I did feel bad for AC Law, but he's been in the news lately there as well. And then also Speedy Claxton is traded in that deal. So that's a lot of guards in one trade. That's like, hey, we have a lot of short guards and you have a lot of short guards. You want to give us your short guard for two of our short guards? And they're like, yeah, sure. That sounds great. So anyway, he is on the move to Atlanta. It goes okay. Finally, in 2010, he gets some real success. He wins the Sixth Man of the Year award, the award that really should bear his name moving forward. If we're being honest,
it really should. Yeah, that's a campaign for that one.
I'm not against it. I'm not against it at all. And the Hawks, your Atlanta Hawks, they make the playoffs. Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, Al Horford, Mike Bibby. I don't care what anybody says. I liked watching those teams. They were a little boring, but I liked them.
Hey, they were fun.
Fun.
Yeah.
Talented team. I mean, look, that's four real good players. You had Jamal Crawford, a real deep bench. I like those Hawks. I will defend those Hawks. But this is the first ever playoff for Jamal Crawford as well, which again, 10 years into his career, he finally makes the playoffs. And of course, Crawford would bounce around a bunch over the remainder of his career. Remain a pretty solid and reliable six-man. 2014 six-man of the year with the Clippers. Helps them win the most games in their franchise history. 57, that's obviously the Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Chris Paul era Clippers. And then November 2nd, 2015, he becomes the third shooting guard in NBA history to reach 16,000 points. So another great mark for him. 2016 six-man of the year with the Clippers. Again, we're saying he's got to win this award. And the best part is that this time he's the oldest winner to win the award in 2016. A record that he previously held in 2014. So he was the oldest, and then he became the oldest again when he won it again. Jamal Crawford needs to be the Sixth Man of the Year namesake. I say it here, but never an all-star, Jamal Crawford, but Sixth Man of the Year 3 times. And of course, we said a favorite of the show. He has one more game after his 51-point finale the prior season with the Phoenix Suns. So during we did a show about. I mean, I think we maybe did an emergency show. At least we did our whole 50-point game series because of Jamal Crawford doing this. I'm almost positive like that was an incredible thing that it would appear to be potentially the final game of Jamal Crawford's career. He gets another 50-point game there, 51 points with the Phoenix Suns. Oldest player ever with 50-point game at 39 years and 20 days. Previously held by some Washington Wizards player, Michael Jordan. It's not the same. That's not the Bulls one, right? That's another guy, right?
No, different. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, it was a Washington Wizards. Michael Jordan makes no sense.
Right.
Anyway, and the most points ever scored by a player not in the starting lineup, previously held by Nick Anderson, April 23rd, 1993. And again, we have a whole series on 50-point games if you want to get a little bit of background about that Nick Anderson one. Yes, we're back NBA.com. You can listen to it all. So Crawford was so close to a bunch of different records, but it didn't look like he was going to get them. But here come the Brooklyn Nets in the bubble, in the Orlando bubble, who say, all right, half our guys don't want to play. Half our guys have COVID. Jamal Crawford, you are going to be the namesake for us. You're third place in all-time three-point percent or attempts. You're top 10, top 5 in three-pointers made and points and all that. There's so many things that he could have done, and ended up he's no longer in third place in the all-time three-point attempts list. James Harden has passed him as well, but he joins the Brooklyn Nets in the bubble. He makes his team debut August 4th, 2020. Scores 5 points, dishes out 3 assists in 5 minutes. And that would be it for Jamal Crawford. That would be his only game as a Brooklyn Net in the bubble. But some things that he did accomplish here. He becomes the 29th player to play at the age of 40. And he joins Vince Carter, Kevin Garnett, Dirk Nowitzki, Robert Parrish, Kevin Willis, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Kobe Bryant as the only players to play at least 20 NBA seasons. So it did get him over the hump. He was able to play 20 NBA seasons, but did not carve out much of a niche with the bubble Brooklyn Nets, unfortunately. So.
He's assuming his career is finished. He is less than 600 points away from 20,000 for his career. So, but alas,
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't. Maybe we'll see.
We'll see.
Not looking great. Not looking great. Unfortunately, but
not looking
I didn't think last year. Hey, look, when he got signed with the Brooklyn Nets, I didn't think it was possible. So you know what?
Yeah.
There's no reason to. I mean, we should keep the faith. Keep the faith, Jason.
I mean, he scored two games ago. He scored 50 points.
Exactly right.
So, the first player to do it with 4 different franchises. So
that's what I'm saying.
Exactly. Yeah. So moving on next, we actually talked about him recently in a recent episode that we talked about guys who played for both the Nuggets and the Lakers. So we'll just kind of give more of a general summary. This is Steve Mix, who accomplished the one-game stint with both the Denver Rockets, now of course the Nuggets, but back when they were in the ABA, they were originally the Rockets, and then the Los Angeles Lakers. And Mick started his career. He played a total of 61 games for the Pistons over 3 seasons. He was waived from the Pistons early in the 1972 season. About a month later, the exact date is 12/23/71, he would pop up in the ABA for just one game for the Rockets, the Denver Rockets again. Now the Nuggets, 2 points, 1 rebound in 4 minutes in a loss to the Pacers. He is one of 17 players who played only one game in the ABA. Of that list, the only person that I'd heard of there was Penny Early, who is a female, I think a race, what do you call it, a jockey, female jockey, who was played for the Colonels. Basically, all she did was basically inbound the ball, and then they called timeout and pulled her out of the game. It was, of course, a publicity stunt for the Colonels at the time. But yes, so yeah, he's definitely the most famous name on that list. And then I unfortunately could not find any reason for the circumstances of him coming to the Rockets and then leaving the Rockets. Why he was cut after only one game, outside of he hadn't really made a name for himself yet, and he'd already been kind of a journeyman. Before the 73 season, he would sign with the Sixers, but then would be cut in training camp, and that was the year in which they finished 9-73. So he was not even good enough.
Yeah, you got to be pretty bad when you get cut from the worst team ever. So
right, yes. But then he would move on to the Continental Basketball Association. He would leave the Grand Rapids Tackers to a CBA championship, averaging 31.1 points per game. And this would prompt the 76ers to give him another look in the 74 season, and then he would stick around for basically the next decade. He'd become an all-star in the 1975 season. He'd average 15.6 points per game, 10.9 rebounds per game. Would be a very near star level player for the Sixers. As they were on the rise into the 70s, and then would kind of slide into a supporting role once they would get more talent. Obviously, they would get Julius Erving, George McGinnis, Bobby Jones, Maurice Cheeks, all those guys, and he'd be a key role player for their for 3 finals teams in 77, 80, and 82. Unfortunately for him, before the 1983 title season, he moved on. He went first. He went to the Milwaukee Bucks. He lasted 57 games there. He was released, and then he signed with the Lakers at the end of the season. He played 1 regular season game with them, so this is a bit of an asterisk because he did actually play a handful of games in the playoffs for them as well. So even though it's on the books for 1 game, with the playoffs, it was multiple games. And unfortunately, he would then go to he'd go to the finals, which was the good part. The bad part was he would face his former 76er squad, and he would be on the losing end of that as they would finally win their championship. So that was sad for him. And then after his playing career, the mayor, as he was nicknamed, he would end up being the women's coach at his alma mater at the University of Toledo, and also at Trine University as well, or Trine College. So he was able to do that. He did some announcing as well. He spent 22 years as a color commentator on the 76ers television broadcast. So he had an interesting little life there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great that the 2 there is really untouched in the 2 games of the 1 team. We even stumped Curtis Harris today, Probes history who was like, "Oh, we got to mention Steve Mixon." I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "The Denver Rockets were like, and the Lakers too." And he was like, "What?" So that's it's a very, very rare case to play one game with two teams exclusively in your career, and still carve out a pretty notable, at least semi-notable career like he did. Next guy I want to talk about here is Bob Rule, who played for the Milwaukee Bucks. Just one game. And this is actually a pretty depressing one, as Rule is really a great what if in NBA history. And speaking of Curtis Harris, wrote a great newsletter about Bob Rule in August 2020 on his Pro Hoops History newsletter. So if you just type in Pro Hoops History Bob Rule on Google or search engine or whatever, it should come up, or just go to Pro Hoops History's newsletter. You should be able to find it again. August 2020 goes into detail about it. But Bob Rule, he's a second-round pick by the expansion Seattle Supersonics. Immediately breaks out as one of the stars of the fledgling franchises. He's nicknamed the Golden Rule, which is an incredible name. He's named to the 1968 NBA All-Rookie Team. And his 18.1 points per game was a Seattle rookie record for 40 seasons, only be broken by some guy named Kevin Durant in 2008. So that's pretty good company to keep there, to keep that record for as long as he did. Also averaged 9.5 rebounds per game. So he's immediately just a tremendous player. And then he actually has 47 points against the Los Angeles Lakers, a talented Los Angeles Lakers team, which is still a Sonics rookie record to this day. And a great quote from this Seattle Times obit about Bob Rule. It says, quote, "I admired people like Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell and Nate Thurman and those guys, but I was not afraid of them," Rule said. "My initial experience in the NBA was to have Nate Thurman block 6 of my 7 shots in the first half. I go to the locker room and the coach, Al Bianchi, says, 'Keep putting him up. He can't block them all.' And I said, 'Yeah, well, if I hadn't made that layup, he would have blocked them all.'" So that's a nice little quote there. But he learned on the job, and he ended up making it work. And then, they combined with Lenny Wilkins. Obviously, Rule is there. Lenny Wilkins is in the backcourt. Walt Hazard, a few other decent players for Seattle. So they're not like a great team, but they looked like a team, at least an expansion team that had talent. It was like, okay, look, this is a team that you can see becoming a thing in the 70s. And obviously they would do that. Unfortunately, Bob Rule would not be a part of that happening because we'll get to that in a sec. But his sophomore year, Rule averages 24 points per game, 1.5 rebounds per game, second only to Elvin Hayes among NBA centers, which, again, very good company to keep for Bob Rule here. He's even better in his third year. He averages 24.6 points per game, 10.6 rebounds per game. He's named to the 1970 NBA All-Star Game. He's actually the third ever Sonic to do that. Walt Hazard and Lenny Wilkins were the other ones to do that. And he finishes third in average among all centers. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar leads the way there. He was also pretty good, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, at 28.8 points per game, and then Elvin Hayes at 27.5. But okay, you're neck and neck there with Elvin Hayes and the rookie Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Like that's not bad. He's still pretty good, and Seattle's starting to get a little bit better too. They climbed to 36 wins. They now have a new player coach in Lenny Wilkins. He's on the court, he's coaching, he's doing all that sort of stuff there, and it seems like it's all going to kind of come together in 1971 as Rule seemed ready for a career year. He averages 29.8 points per game over the season's first 4 games, and then tragedy unfortunately strikes. And an unfortunate irony to the man who would break his rookie scoring record. Rule is going to tear his Achilles in a game. And worse yet, it's while he was having contract negotiations with the team. A little bit of background here. This is again from Curtis's great newsletter about him. It says the Sacramento Bee reported on October 14th, 1970, that Rule had rejected a contract offer from the Sonics. I had hoped that we would reach an agreement on Wednesday, and I'm very disappointed that we didn't. This is from Sam Schulman, who's the Sonics owner. He says, I offered $60,000 with a chance for him to make $90,000. They wanted $75,000 with some added incentives. Thankfully, though, for Bob Rule, is he did sign the contract just before the injury. He says the Curtis sort of alludes to the idea that the final number likely came somewhere between 60,000 and obviously the 75,000 that he demanded, which again is a much bigger increase than the 28,000 that he had made the prior 28,500 he had made in 1970. But regardless, he tears his Achilles, and that's kind of going to unfortunately be it for Bob Rule being a top tier player. Lenny Wilkins is quoted saying it was tough. He certainly wanted to recover. He knew he had a good future, but we never saw him healthy again, and he really would never be the same player again. He'd return in 1972, but his scoring was gone, and really his role was as well as he comes back to Seattle. Well, at this time, they were able to bring in Spencer Haywood, who was obviously having a bunch of issues with rules and like you said, and issues with eligibility and whatnot. Well, he is able to come in. He's able to, add to the team. So when Rule does come back from his injury, his playing time is basically gone. They basically replaced him with Spencer Haywood. He only averaged 7.1 points per game, in his return to Seattle, and then he's eventually traded to Philadelphia. He'd play a lot better in Philadelphia, 17.3 points per game, 8 rebounds per game, which is really good, but he's starting to struggle with his athleticism, and it's clear that like he's not really what he was, and he never really fully recovered from that Achilles injury, which again, like Kevin, we're watching what we're watching in today's NBA right now as it's going on is like historic. Like Kevin Durant being as good as he is after an Achilles injury, it just doesn't happen. Like guys do not, I mean, many guys that we've seen that have had that injury never come back. And those are guys with modern medicine and modern athletics and modern sports training, all that sort of stuff. Very different in the early 70s, you know, blowing out your Achilles and still trying to become an NBA player. But Rule, you know, he joins the Philadelphia team that's in free fall as well. So a lot of issues going on there. 3 games in the 1973 season, Rule is traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. His numbers are going to tank even more as he averages only 2.7 points per game there. As I said, then in 1974, he improves a little bit to 7.2 points per game, but after 26 games, he is waived by the Cleveland Cavaliers, and this is a quote from Bill Fitch of the Cavaliers. He says, Bob was making a super salary. By putting him on waivers, he has a chance to negotiate his salary with a team that might need him. If he's traded, the club that gets him has to take him with his present salary. I just hope Bob doesn't give up trying, but it got to the point where Steve Patterson and Drew Brewer were playing very well, and that's a ton of money to pay for a player who just sits on the bench. So an unfortunate
Bill Fitch, always the delicate with,
really saying like I don't want to pay this guy who's no good a bunch of money.
Right. Or
like I hope he keeps his head up. I hope he doesn't I hope he doesn't give up,
right.
But he stinks and we don't want to pay him any more money because he sits on the bench all day. It's like Jesus God.
Yeah. Come on, Bill.
He's coming back from with Achilles. Like
all diplomacy. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't sign the. He didn't write up the contract. Well, I guess he kind of did, but he signed it anyway.
Right.
Rule's going to get picked up by the Milwaukee Bucks. Of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is still there, and he's only he's going to be the backup for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but it does not last very long. In fact, it lasts. You guessed it, 1 game. That's the reason we're doing this entire show. That's the reason we're talking about him. He played 1 very unproductive game for the team. 0 points, 2 fouls, 2 assists, 0 of 1 from the floor. He's waived again and never plays in the NBA ever again as well. But a real good what if of the early 70s too, especially on that Seattle team that could have been just another weapon because they were already winning. By 5-6 years in, they're winning titles. They're in the NBA Finals. They're winning titles as an expansion team. Like you do wonder what would happen if they had him as well, and if that would have helped, hurt, or whatever. But definitely a what if.
Yeah, I mean, especially during those Russell years, it's another weapon that they have. And those are pretty good teams. With you probably could have figured a way to, if he's healthy, he plays alongside Haywood, or you figure some way of making that work. And he definitely improves the talent situation for them. For it to shame that it happened the way that it did.
Yeah, for sure.
So next we have Walt Bellamy of the New Orleans Jazz. He is the only Naismith Hall of Famer on this list, at least so far. This is during the expansion, or actually they acquired before the expansion season for the Jazz. The Jazz had really, really wanted Pete Maravich, as most of our fans know. They gave up the Jazz gave up a king's ransom to get Maravich. They gave up 2 players and 5 draft picks. 2 of them were first rounders, and in fact, one of them ended up being the number 1 overall in 1975. That was David Thompson. So, also as part of the trade, the Hawks ended up getting the first 2 players that the Jazz selected in the dispersal draft, or the expansion draft rather, Bob Kaufman and Dean Meminger. So, a lot of talent going there. The Jazz decided, we're going to get Pete Maravich. We might as well get Pete Maravich's running buddy, Walt Bellamy. Mm-hmm. They've been playing together for 4 or 5 years, and he was selected by the Jazz in that expansion draft. The trade actually happened on the same day as the expansion draft. Bellamy at this point was heading into his 14th season, though, he'd obviously been overshadowed in his career by guys like Will Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but, career, nothing to be ashamed of. 20.1 points per game, 13.7 rebounds per game. He's a 4-time All-Star. He's Rookie of the Year. He'd not had a lot of postseason success, but, been on some fairly good teams here and there. Certainly a more than respectable career. But he bounced around a lot. His first 2 years with the with the expansion Chicago franchise, the Packers Zephyrs, and then he spent 2 years when that team moved to Baltimore to become the Bullets. Then he spent about 3.5 years with the Knicks. He did help lead that team to the playoffs for the first time in 8 seasons. Then he had a short stint with the Pistons, then kind of settled into the later part of his career with the Hawks. Again, starring with Maravich and Lou Hudson for 4+ years. So that led to this point where he was with the Jazz, and he played for the Jazz on the first game of the season. He had 6 points and 5 rebounds in 14 minutes. So certainly, productive game for Bellamy. But Bellamy was again. I could not find whether it was Bellamy's decision. If he's just like, I'm not really into the whole idea of playing pro basketball anymore, or if I don't want to play for the Jazz. Or if it was the team's decision for some reason, but he was waived by the Jazz and did not play in the NBA again. And it seemed like he could still play. I mean, based on his production the previous season,
right.
Yeah. I mean, he averaged 13.1 points per game, 9.6 rebounds, close to 50% shooting. I mean, his numbers were fine. They were about as good as they'd been over the previous 4 seasons. So, which makes me think it was probably just maybe he was just ready to be done.
And it's not like a bunch of injuries too, because you look at his games played throughout the his career, and he's an Iron Man. I mean, obviously playing 88 games in the one year that we always bring up, but no, like even the year prior, he's still playing 77, 74, 82, 82, 88, 80, 80, 70. I mean, he's a guy that was playing all. I mean, it weren't like a bunch of nagging injuries, and he's just like, it hurts too much to play. I'm done. Yeah, you wonder if it was just playing in New Orleans, he's probably just like, this is not going to go well. I don't really want to be a part of this anymore, or something. Right. I don't know. Yeah, it's very interesting, like you said, because he's playing with Maravich. He's playing with his old running mate. Maybe he hated Maravich. I don't know.
Maybe I don't know.
This guy again. I'm out of here. Screw this.
Exactly. Yeah, well, Bells was always somebody who kind of marched to the beat of his own drummer. So, who knows? But it's interesting. Yeah, it seems. I mean, it's definitely at the age where it was close to the end, but it seems. But yeah, no injury was mentioned in anything that I read. So, not clear on the why, but yes, he has one game as a Jazz man.
There you go.
The very first Jazz game.
Yeah. Famous there. All right, so our final guy we're going to talk about here is Andrew Bogut on the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I suddenly got very hungry for pizza. I don't know if it's just you or just me. I don't know if I'm really hungry. Anyway, Andrew Bogut, selected by the Milwaukee Bucks, first overall pick.
Rich, I have to say, I did not see that reference coming. Not see.
The little pizza kale.
Yeah. Anyway,
is he still? I don't know. Follow today's Andrew Bogut, but I can't imagine what.
Yeah, there's no reason to. It's not good.
I imagine it's going well, and yeah.
It's worse. Yeah.
Anyway. Selected by the Milwaukee Bucks, first overall pick in the 2005 NBA draft, and despite some bumps in the road, obviously, for Bogut, he's actually going to be 8th in that class. That's a really deep, really good NBA draft as well. He's going to trail Chris Paul, Darren Williams, David Lee, Marvin Williams. Vindicated there for Marvin Williams as he's still carving out a great NBA career. Yes.
That's right.
I mean, not so much for the Atlanta Hawks, but vindication for Marvin, I guess.
Well,
yeah.
He did half that. Yeah, half those.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It does help that Darren Williams kind of became a pile of crap real quickly. Because when it was like when you were bookended by 2 Hall of Famers, it ended up being kind of a struggle there. But anyway, Lou Williams, Marcin Gortat, and Amir Johnson all have more win shares than Andrew Bogut of the 2005 draft. But that's some decent company and some pretty interesting guys. But anyway, Bogut's going to finish 3rd in Rookie of the Year that year, averaging 9.4 points per game, 7 rebounds per game for the Bucks. 2008 career highs in both points, 14.3, and rebounds, 9.8 for Bogut as well. The problem, though, is he's going to start having a lot of injuries in Milwaukee. A lot of nagging injuries. He's going to have a stress fracture in his back, leg bruises, and then in April 2010, probably the most famous injury of Andrew Bogut's career, a disgusting fall that results in a broken hand and a dislocated elbow, and just a very disgusting replay that I never want to see again. He would miss the entire 2010 season because of that. In 2012, he comes back, he fractures his ankle, misses more time, and the Milwaukee Bucks decide, okay, we're kind of done with this, and we're going to move on. And they move on in one of the more transformative deals in NBA history, one of the biggest deals in NBA history that had ripple effects on the very fabric and the very history of the NBA. The Milwaukee Bucks trade Andrew Bogut to Golden State for Monta Ellis. I mean, just the biggest trade in NBA history. Not because of Andrew Bogut or really because of Monta Ellis, but what it does is it opens the door for Steph Curry then to become the full-time point guard for the Warriors. And the Warriors make a deep playoff run almost instantly and become, the Warriors, as we saw the fucking dynasty that completely changed the way the NBA played. So.
I mean, they didn't keep AC Law. If they kept AC Law, then obviously AC Law would have,
Right. Yeah, it was both of those. You're right. So it was both deals, actually. It was the Jamal Crawford trade and so there are two transformative deals that we talked about here that really set the stage for today's NBA. But this is I'm all laughing aside. Like, this really did change things. I mean, and this is famous. I remember Jerry West when he was kind of introducing the new owners, the Joe Lacob and I forget the other guy, Peter Guber, right? Isn't that the other guys? Yeah, Lacob and Guber. It was like the first game, in Oracle after they had traded Monta Ellis, and this crowd is just booing. Like, how dare you trade Monta Ellis, you son of a bitches, you guys suck. And Jerry West, I remember, had to grab the microphone and be like, just stay with us, we're smart, we know what we're doing. Nobody trusted Jerry, but Jerry ended up being right on that one. So it ended up working out pretty well, because Bogut plays well with the Warriors, albeit in a slightly reduced role. His scoring is cut in half from his double-digit years with the Bucks. Or was it Rick Barry that No, was it Rick Barry? I think it was Rick Barry, actually, now that I think of it.
It was Rick Barry, you're right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because Jerry West would have just been like, these idiots don't know what they're talking about. Rick Barry's like, I'm going to tell these idiots they don't know what they're talking about.
Yes.
Like, Jerry West is like, we'll just prove it on the court. They don't care. Rick's like, no. Give me that damn microphone.
I'm going to convince him. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they're two very different personalities. Man, incredible. Yeah. Love Rick Barry. Anyway, so and he was right. Rick Barry was right again on that one.
Right again.
Anyway, Bogut plays a slightly reduced role, scoring really cut in half from his double-digit years in the Bucks. Still remains a solid defender, a really good rebounder, and really, I mean, one of the linchpins of that early Warriors team. Because with Steph and Clay and those guys sort of emerging as scorers and not quite complete defenders at that point, having interior defense with Andrew Bogut really helped, and he's setting great screens on the top. Like, it was the perfect role for Bogut and a perfect role for the Warriors. And of course, they'd win the title in 2015. And I'm not saying this is because of it, but Bogut gets hurt again in Game 5 of the 2016 NBA Finals. And the Warriors do end up blowing that huge lead and losing in the finals. So I don't know if that's a coincidence. I'm just saying,
Yeah, it might be a conspiracy involving pizza. Who knows?
It's very possible. Yes, some people might say that Draymond Green getting suspended turned the corner of that entire series. I like to think that it was Andrew Bogut getting hurt. But
so something that just occurred to me: the fact that two of the key players of the early Warriors, Bogut and Sean Livingston, both are known for extremely horrific injuries.
You're right. Yeah. Thank you. So, now I'm just reminded of Sean Livingston's horrific injury.
Those are both not ideal. So
you're right.
Anyway, so a little sunshine in our day here.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Anyway, July 2016, the Warriors decide, you know what, we don't really need Andrew Bogut that much. They trade him to the Dallas Mavericks. And another transformative deal in NBA history, Andrew Bogut and really many of these, because what they end up doing is getting away from Andrew Bogut's salary. The NBA salary cap increases a little bit. The Warriors have a little bit of space, and they decide, you know what, let's sign Kevin Durant. And then Kevin Durant comes to the Golden State Warriors, and obviously it works out very well. They win some titles. February 2017, Bogut is traded in a much less transformative deal. Slightly less transformative than Kevin Durant or any of those other ones, but he is dealt to Philadelphia for Nerlens Noel. So slightly less transformative in that one. And now the game we're here to talk about, March 2nd, the Philadelphia 76ers decide they have absolutely no use for Andrew Bogut at this time in February 2017, so they immediately waive him. March 2nd, 2017, Bogut signs with the Cavaliers, a team he was very familiar with during their NBA Finals battles, which was one of like 8 players that it felt like the Cavaliers and the Warriors would just trade back and forth every single year. And like the Anderson Varejao, Andrew Bogut guys, and it was just like, they really need Andrew Bogut? Like, what are you doing? But whatever, they decided that's what they needed. Maybe they get some intel on the Warriors. But anyway, March 6, 2017, Bogut gets into the game. He commits 2 fouls, then 56 minutes later, he fractures his tibia. So that is a very ominous beginning to his Cavaliers run, and the final run of his Cavaliers run, because that is the one game that he plays with them. He's released March 13th, 2017. He makes brief stops in Los Angeles, and again with the Warriors in 2019, which I completely forgot was a thing, but at this point he barely played and was pretty much irrelevant. I think he had one or two like pretty decent playoff games that were kind of like this throwback games or whatever. But for the most part, not very good. And now I don't really know what he's doing or really care what Andrew Bogut's doing. So
it's not good, not worth digging into. So don't recommend it. So
that's it, Andrew Bogut.
Andrew Bogut. All right, yeah. Ending with a bang. So good stuff. This was a fun one. I enjoyed learning some stories about these guys. Obviously the one game thing is definitely just sort of an oddity there. I think we're looking into initially. I got this idea because I wanted to look at guys who were had only ever played for a team during the preseason and never during the regular season or the postseason, or guys who just played for a team on the postseason. But it was a lot harder to research into those guys than it was to do into this. So we started with this, and maybe we'll do the other idea later.
Yeah, we're pretty interested in another one. We found some good players. It's going to take a little bit longer to find like the all these guys because there's a bunch of dudes, right, that have like a training camp run or things like that are hard to find. But we're working on that one. But if you do know of anybody, your favorite team, and you remember, hey, I remember when blank played for my favorite team for a little bit. Let us know because that'll help us. But we have a few guys, and it'll be definitely a fun episode to touch on here.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks everyone for checking us out. Of course, you can, again, as we talked about at the top of the show, you can go to overandbacknba.com and you can find our complete and full archives now. Any of our past shows, you can go there, you can find the link, you can download it, you can listen to it on any of your favorite podcast platforms, so on and so forth. Of course, any place that you listen to us, whether it's Apple Podcasts, whether it's Spotify, wherever you are, if you could leave us a rating and review, we would greatly appreciate it. That helps other people learn about the show. We are also on social media, Facebook and Twitter, both Over and Back NBA. If you want to communicate with us, let us know if you have any ideas for us, any corrections, any compliments or gentle criticisms. We would appreciate those. So thanks again for listening, and we're back again soon.